of sunshine and out it comes. Sunburned belly, shoulders bum. He marches to the mower's drum. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and ear-splitting screeches, kids at play. Take your dog and get it spayed. Socks and sandals every day. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and ear-splitting screeches, kids at play. Take your dog and get it spayed. Socks and sandals every day. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and prayers for autumn comes to naught. Once drank all the booze we bought. Dodging showers is a sport. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and spend most of it in the pub, dining on reheated grub. Give those nettle stings a rub. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and visiting the village fete, drinking cider by the lake. I think the shop keeps on the take. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and bunch of tourists on a bus. Order lunch before the rush. Someone here forgot to flush. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and on, and on, and thunder splits the sky in twain. Rain stops, play again, again. Shrugs and offers the refrain. It's a British summer, and the band plays on, and 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 on. I'll be glad when they're gone. And chips by the seaside. Even when the rain comes down, we keep the good vibes. With the souls in the air and the waves by our side. Soggy fish and chips, yeah, we take it all in stride. Underneath the cloudy skies, we found a little shack. Ordered up some fish and chips, no turning back. The sea was roaring loud and the wind began to blow, but nothing's gonna stop us from enjoying the show. The chips might be a little late, the fish a bit too wet, but the taste of the ocean, that's something we won't forget. Oh, eating soggy fish and chips by the seaside. Even when the rain comes down, we keep the good vibes. With the souls in the air and the waves by our side. Soggy fish and chips, yeah, we take it all in stride. The rain is coming down, but we're smiling through it all. Got our soggy fish and chips out in a bowl. The seagulls circle round, hoping for a bite, but we ain't giving up, we're giving them a fight. The chips might be a little limp, the fish a bit too wet, but the taste of the ocean, that's something we won't forget. Oh, eating soggy fish and chips by the seaside. Even when the rain comes down, we keep the good vibes. With the souls in the air and the waves by our side. Soggy fish and chips, yeah, we take it all in stride. The rain is coming down, but we're smiling through it all. Got our soggy fish and chips, having a ball. The seagulls circle round, hoping for for a bite, but we ain't giving up, we're giving them a fight. The chips might be a little limp, the fish a bit too wet, but the taste of the ocean, that's something we won't forget. We eat soggy fish and chips by the seaside. Even when the rain comes down, we keep the good vibes. With the salt in the air and the waves by our side. Soggy fish and chips, yeah, we take it all in stride. Life's about the moments, not the perfect plate. It's about the company and the love we create. So here's to soggy fish and chips and memories we'll make at the seaside in the rain, with every bite we take. We eat soggy fish and chips by the seaside. Even when the rain comes down, we keep the good vibes. With the salt in the air and the waves by our side. Soggy fish and chips, yeah, we take it all in stride. So next time you're down by the pebble beach, remember this song and the joy within reach. Soggy fish and chips with a smile so wide at the seaside, we take it all in stride.
I love a roast, love me king, love me flag and sovereign ring. Ate the woke, ate the in-ease, ate Europe, ate the gimmies. Simple as I love Brexit, love a pint, love a big shit, love a fight. Ate art, ate vegans, ate protests, unless I'm in 'em. Simple as I love the footy, love Mrs. Thatcher, love the old days, love a scratcher. Ate Labour, ate the Greens, ate strikers, their pay's obscene. Simple as I love me lawn, love me chips, love me TV, love some tits. Ate millennials, ate bikes, ate darkies, ate kikes. Simple as I love the telly or GB News, love a bacon sandwich too. Ate slarts, ate slopes, ate paddies, ate the Pope. Simple as I love page 3, love the war, love me beer at 4:30. Ate khakis, ate the nips, ate Chinese, ate the Crips. Simple as I love me Pawn, love Nigel Farage, love me bagger in the garage. Ate the pikeys, ate the chinks, ate the eye ties, ate to think. Simple as I love a spoons, that lad's alright. Love our Boris, well I just might. Ate the blacks, ate the browns, ate the Muslies in our towns. Simple as love a fag, not a fag box. Love wearing a donkey jacket. Ate the gays, ate the lessers, ate the trans cause they're fellas. Simple as I love me action movie flicks. Love drinking till I'm sick. Ate the homos and their tricks, cause I'm worried I might like dicks. Simple as love a fag.
Real grim. What are we gonna do?
Grim, that's how it looks.
I'll take Grim right now.
I am the Grim Reaper.
Bit grim.
The bosses are good.
And make it grim.
A grim tale indeed.
It's a little grim.
Meaningless and grim.
It's the grim.
It's Grim.
Pretty grim, huh?
Things look grim.
Okay, I boomed it. Can you hear me now? Hear me now. I shall wait a minute until you say yes or no. Anyone? Bueller? Okay, groovy. Could you hear the music before? Let me know. Fantastic. All right. So as I was saying before I boomed it, why do a stream? Oh, well, you fuckers don't seem to know what you want. So I've had messages from some people saying, "Well, why aren't you talking about this? You talked about Trump." Yeah, I did, and you fuckers went off, didn't you? So you might understand why I might be a little bit gun shy. My impression T-shirt was that it was making fun of people, so that's why I put it up. I wouldn't have put it up otherwise. Yeah, so I thought I'd do a stream instead because it's a little bit less damaging and because I can interact with you lot and you might have questions and things because a lot of you are filthy colonials, so you might not necessarily know exactly what's been going on or the context behind it or anything else. Though I'm sure you've been hearing a lot of commentary online about it. But like, did you think I was like lying all these years when I said I was left wing? Did you think it was just bullshit, or is it just because I'm a different kind of left wing than you're used to, perhaps? But still left wing. It's just I've disagreed with a bunch of stuff, like previous riots, and so on. I've said, this doesn't do any good. This makes you look bad. It doesn't get your message across. And, that was people who had more legitimate grievance. Things like police brutality, perhaps, for example, right? That's a legitimate grievance. That's something that happens. You can point at statistics and you can point at incidents and so on. And you can't do that in the same way with what's got all these people kicking off. I can already hear imaginary objections, but yeah, I mean, do you want me to be completely apolitical? Yeah, it is a big part of who I am. I just don't propagandize in my writing or my games. It doesn't mean I'm not political, that I don't have a position or a stance, right? And this is an exceptional set of circumstances. This is a big event that is affecting a lot of people I know. Mrs. Grimm is an immigrant, albeit a white one, right? I have Bangladeshi friends, Sri Lankan friends, Malaysian Chinese friends, Indian friends, LGBT friends, people who came here fleeing problems in their home countries, all of that kind of stuff. So this affects people I know in my community, if you like. I'll get to comments and stuff in a bit. So it's not something remote, right? And this is a big event, ongoing event. Of course, I'm going to comment on it. It's big, it's drastic, like the assassination attempt on Trump. Like, I never said that was a good thing. What it did do, and I've never been so happy to be wrong, is I thought it made Trump unstoppable. And I thought that was kind of going to be it for the States. Looking around the world, there's this big rise in far-right populism in Germany, of all places, in France, in the States, and over here in the UK, to the point where it has infiltrated the main parties. So I was worried, very worried, that after the assassination attempt, Trump would be unstoppable and you would have a far-right takeover in the US. Fortunately, it looks like that may not happen, or at least will be softened some. And over here, I thought that after the elections and reform, I mean, they got some MPs, which is a victory for them, but they didn't have a massive breakthrough. The Conservatives were smashed after chasing that far-right vote. You know, things looked on the up, and then all of this kicks off. So enough preamble then. Okay, so what happened? A guy walked into a holiday club in Southport and stabbed a bunch of people, specifically young girls, primary school age, 10 and under for the most part, maybe 12 and under. And the teacher there and some people who came to try and intervene also got stabbed. 3 young girls died. I'm not sure of the condition of other people. The teacher, I think, was released from hospital earlier today. Anyway, because the attacker was under 18, we have very strict laws here in the UK about protecting the identity of minors and so on who are caught up in legal cases, whether they're an accused perpetrator or a victim or whatever else. We generally don't release much of anything in the way of information without a family say-so or the judge making a special exception. So there was a vacuum of information, and into that vacuum, a bunch of online far-right gobs on sticks like Tommy Robinson and his ilk started spreading information, Andrew Tate as well, repeating information that was just plain false. That this attacker was a fresh immigrant fresh off the boat, right? From one of these channel crossings. He wasn't. That he was a Muslim. He wasn't. That it was a terrorist attack. It wasn't. None of that turned out to be true, but it fits all of those kind of stereotypes. And so they leapt all over it, and they've used it as a sort of rallying cry, even though none of it's true, to band a bunch of people together, travel to different towns and cities, attack hotels where asylum-seeking immigrants, that's people who fled, war-torn areas and persecution, are being held before they're processed. And they have smashed those places up, terrorized the people in there, set fire to some of them, set fire to a police station, burnt several police cars. Lots of police and lots of regular people are in hospital because of all of this. They burnt a child's library. They looted a Greg's and an O2 phone store and other things. It's a lot of it's opportunism, quite frankly, as always happens when these riots kick off. But there does seem to be a core of people traveling from place to place, making this look like more than it is, stirring up trouble. And of course, the disinformation and misinformation online is incredibly flagrant at this point. So, yeah, that's the basics of this specific event. But you have to contextualize it, right? Now, despite the killer having been born here, being fully British, his parents were Rwandan immigrants, presumably fleeing the Rwandan genocide. So because he's not white, that is enough for some people. And contextually, you have to consider the role of the likes of Nigel Farage and the various political entities he's been part of. I can't say parties because Reform UK is not a political party, it's a limited company. Or the Daily Mail that is now clutching its pearls about all this violence, but has had headline after headline after headline over the last at least decade, demonizing immigrants and asylum seekers and so on, and painting them in a bad light. And now they're shocked that people have turned violent. Same with the Daily Express. Same with GB News. Same with, again, Tommy Robinson and figures like that. And so infectious and nasty has their rhetoric been that it had infected the Conservative Party. I mean, for quite some time, but particularly this last election cycle, their vote share was being taken off them by Reform, who were more extreme, the fascist BNP in suits, basically. So instead of refuting that and trying to go after a different vote share, they lent into it, but they could never be quite as extreme and quite as appealing as Reform was to these kind of people, which seems to be maybe 30% of the country all told. And so that's a large part of the reason they got an absolute drubbing in the election. That may contextually be part of what the issue is here, because the far right was so utterly rebuked in the election. Maybe they're stinging a bit and feel a need to lash out and cause extra problems. That could be part of the context as well. Even Labour, in order to get elected, in order to be considered electable, their stance on immigration and so on has been dragged to the right as well. But frankly, for all the rhetoric and the stupid ideas like flying asylum seekers off to Rwanda, there isn't really anything to be done that can satisfy these people who are rioting, because what they want is completely unrealistic and would do more damage to the UK economy than Liz Truss managed to during her brief tenure, because we already don't have enough workers. And because we left the EU, we don't have access to the EU workers, at least not as easily. So in order to compensate, the Conservative government, which had been talking about itself being anti-immigration so much, had to loosen immigration restrictions. The lightning rod issue for people hasn't been all the normal immigration, though that is actually what a lot of these people are pissed off about, brown faces and so on being around. Their lightning rod issue was to concentrate on these channel crossings by relatively small numbers. 1,000 sounds like a lot, but it's not compared to population size. Coming across. And the only reason they're coming across that way, which is very dangerous to them, is because the right-wing government's cut off legal routes for people to apply for asylum. So it's a problem of their own making that they've then presented as a problem and as an excuse for their inaction, which is actually taking place because it's an economic reality that we need more people in the country and thus more immigration. And since Brexit, that immigration has to come from, to put it bluntly, non-white countries to keep the whole thing going. Some people seem to be objecting to the idea that this is a far-right exercise. But when people are doing Nazi salutes at the cenotaph and people with Nazi tattoos are being photographed all over the place, that I feel fairly comfortable, given all the nativist rhetoric, the anti-immigrant rhetoric, all the rest of it. I feel fairly comfortable in pointing at these people and saying far right. And in many cases, you're actual Nazis, or at least neo-Nazis. But the misinformation has gone on. You would think if you'd built your... They keep calling them protests. They're not protests. They're groundless riots. It's a violent spasm of bigotry is what it is. It's not a protest. You would think the information coming out that this lad who did the murders was British and not Muslim, you would think that would take the wind out of the sails of all this, but it hasn't. And it just keeps spreading and getting worse. It's hard to tell exactly how many people are involved. A lot of other people have been dragged into it, because if you say, like, Save Our Kids, oh, young girls have been murdered, people immediately have an emotional reaction, right? Anyone does with a heart. And that's also how they kind of spread their nonsense online. They will share like pictures of, remember the British war dead or whatever, and that will end up getting you in your feed more stuff from these British nationalist types. That's just how they work. They'll pluck at your heartstrings with something, and you don't realize that suddenly you're in the fash feed. But they're continuing to spread disinformation. Like some guy turned up and interrupted the vigil that was being held for the dead girls. Guy with 7 knives on him. They said he was a Muslim who'd come to cause trouble. No, he was one of theirs. So, and they've made up other knife attacks and acid attacks and other stuff to try and keep people hyped up. So you can't trust fucking anything. Fact check everything. And meanwhile, after helping stir up all this shit by resharing stuff, Tommy Robinson is off in Cyprus with his trotters up, because just before all this kicked off, him and his followers had a big old English Defence League reunion of about 30,000 of them in London, where he illegally showed them his documentary, which had a court order against it. And here's the irony, one of many ironies in this situation. The reason it has a court order against it, and the reason why he's now going to be jailed when they get their hands on him again, is because of a previous time when he fingered the wrong guy as being responsible for attacks. So that's one big irony. And I suppose the other irony is, you know, the Conservatives, their big plan, their clever scheme was to ship asylum seekers to Rwanda. And the murderer's parents were from Rwanda and came over here and sought refuge here. So that's another big irony for you. But that's a general sort of sketch of the whole thing. I will now look back through your comments and see if there's anything I can talk about here. But just to reiterate from the beginning, I was not lying when I said I was left-wing. I have tried to be open to conversation from both sides. I have condemned riots by the other side and pointless damage and so on. I think we need to understand what's going on. Quite often in riots and so on, there is some underlying genuine grievance. But in this case, there isn't. But I do think a lot of the blame still lies on my own tribe, so to speak. Because it has been awfully lonely out here trying to have conversations and debunk stuff and argue rather than just censoring and ignoring, which has been the tactic for a long time. And I think that's a big part of why we are where we are. Anyway, all the comments telling me I'm not speaking. La 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 la. Heard the music. We addressed the hate speech thing. I think it was taking the piss. Rivers of Blood. So some of you might not know what that means, but that was a famous speech by a very conservative politician, Enoch Powell. So a notorious speech, I should perhaps say. He was being massively anti-immigration at the time on similar nativist, nationalist, racist sort of grounds, but he was going on about the West Indian immigrants who have actually since then immigrated and assimilated pretty well, all things considered. Of course, previous people had exactly the same sorts of things to say about the Irish, the Italians, the Greeks. Probably if you go back far enough, you know, the Dutch weavers, whatever they were called, you know, any wave of immigration. It's kind of stupid in this country because we're mongrels. You know, Angles, Saxons, Danes, Celts, Picts, Normans, pure French, you name it. You know, we've had a bit of everything. So it's kind of silly to get precious about race if you're British. Patrick says, if you want to use the Marxist big picture, you could say this is just a struggle for resources that is inevitable. Not really. Resources are like the future. They're just not evenly distributed yet. And that's not me saying everyone should have exactly the same, but the kinds of people that normally say, why are we helping these asylum seekers and blah blah blah? We've got homeless veterans. They don't want to help homeless veterans either. They don't want to help anybody, really. When it comes down to it, they regard anyone who needs a hand as a scrounger and whatever else. Even though, ironically, a lot of them are members of what could loosely be described as the British underclass. So no one else deserves help. Only them. And the structures that we have in place to help people are things that we put in place as sort of global leaders after World War II, so that situations like the Holocaust wouldn't happen again. And now they want to turn their backs on what is, I think, one of Britain's proudest legacies, other than crushing slavery. I think the international sort of asylum system and refugee status that we helped establish, I think that's one of Britain's greatest legacies, and they don't want it. And I think that the truth behind what's going on comes out when you consider how the Ukrainian refugees were welcomed and brought into people's homes and looked after with nary a peep. But of course, they're white and Christian, albeit Orthodox. Not that religion's a big factor in the UK. It kind of becomes a bit obvious when you'll turn away a Syrian refugee but welcome a Ukrainian one, I think. Are any of my friends interested in old Mexijufrican dudes? I can ask. It's not really the topic for tonight. Everyone talks about a fascist takeover here being the US, presumably. But you guys have far more of a Mosley history than we do. Well, I'd say Mosley's interesting. A lot of our fascists have, in the past, came from the aristocracy. And then the people that followed them tended to come from the lower class or the underclass for some reason. I think maybe that's some of the sort of cap-doffing culture that remains in the UK that may be responsible for that. The black shirts were never really a huge threat. They could have been, because they had the backing of some other members of the nobility, and of course, famously, the Daily Mail backed him. Hurrah for the black shirts is the famous headline, and so on. But the outbreak of war is what did for Mosley and the other nobility who were keen on the fash, because you can't very well be seen to be backing that when the country's at war. So that kind of put paid to it. But before that, it was on the decline. I'm sure if you're a connoisseur of this history, you're aware of the Battle of Cable Street. So following some attacks by anti-fascist elements on black shirts meetings and the British Union of Fascist meetings, Mosley decided to be very provocative and to march his black shirts through a primarily Jewish section of London. And everyone who opposed him turned out and kind of fought them. There was a massive running street battle for a while. The police managed to separate the two sides, and Mosley backed off and ended up looking quite good from the fact that he brought an end to the violence and, turned away. That actually kept the black shirts going for a while, because up to that point, they were in massive steep decline. Donations were down. The Daily Mail had disavowed them, all of that kind of thing. So that put new life into them, the violence against them, really. That's why I've often advocated against this whole punch a Nazi idea. I think it's stupid and it helps them, right? That particular guy who got punched on camera, like, he doubled and then doubled again his social media following after he was punched. So if you want to silence fascists, that's not the way to do it. What did then disarm fascists was that the local, regional and national government put a whole bunch of resources into the area to make sure there was adequate housing for everybody, to make sure all the services and everything were up to scratch. And that kind of killed the whole fascist movement. And that's what I think needs to be done here. There is deprivation, certainly, but everyone is suffering from deprivation. And it's a whole distraction game. Set the lower classes fighting against each other rather than focusing on where the real problem is. It's a whole classic thing. Yes, he's British, well, technically Welsh-born, but British citizen of formerly Rwandan parents. I believe they're normalized citizens. And he was 17, not 18, so still a minor, but an exception was made to reveal his identity. So basically, you've had your summer of love in the UK like we did after George Floyd. So there's intent and there's action, right? There's different underlying things there. Like the George Floyd riots, some of that was down to deprivation and so on. There's more violence during the summer. Did you know that? That's quite interesting. If the weather's hot, people seem to be more violent. There's a really strong correlation. I don't think anyone knows quite why. Irritability and lack of sleep, maybe. But there were underlying things about the George Floyd riots, though, again, I would say I'm against them, but at least there was something there to talk about. Police brutality, even questionable incidents become interpreted as racist policing because there's such a strong history of racist policing. It's very easy to believe whether it's true or not, but there is an underlying historical problem with racial policing and police brutality and so on in the States. So at least there's a kernel of truth to it. To these riots, there is no kernel of truth. There is nothing to it. It's nonsense. If I was to make a comparison, it would be how during COVID, if you remember, people were sabotaging the new 5G towers that were going up because they believed earnestly that they were causing the disease, or that they were going to activate the disease or something. There's absolutely no truth whatsoever to that, but they went out and they made actions, many of them genuinely believing it, but many people just kind of spreading the conspiracy theories online for a laugh or for a profit. And that's more what I would compare this to, because immigrants aren't a problem. Something like 30% of NHS doctors or something are immigrants. A large proportion of other healthcare workers and so on. Immigrants pay in 1.1 times what they take out of the exchequer if they're non-EU migrants. EU migrants bring in about 1.3 times what they take out from the exchequer. So it's a net benefit. More doctors, more medical workers, more money changing hands. It's the opposite of a problem. And the effect on wages is extremely minor, negligible. And they do jobs that we don't have people to do or that will do. Shit jobs, which should be paid more, whoever's doing them. But you've got to be pragmatic at some point. But yeah, the kid involved was 17, which is part of the reason why the judge allowed his identity out, partly to try and stop all these riots going on. That had no effect there, partly because he was like a week off his 18th birthday when it happened. So, and obviously it's in the public interest at this point. And it was more harmful to keep the information out of people's hands rather than to give it. Yeah, Patrick says much the same thing as I was just saying there. Yeah, the vacuum of information was filled by bad actors online. Now, there is involvement from Russian bot farms, but I wouldn't go as far as to suggest that they made this happen. It's just that they are kind of opportunistically signal boosting the misinformation and disinformation and stirring things up and making people angry. Same as I don't think there was collusion around Donald Trump, but clearly it was in their interest to fuck around around his election, and so they did. So Russian assistance, but not collusion. And I believe that's what the report said in the end. That allowed the conspiracy theorists to run in and establish their own narrative for their own nefarious purposes. Yeah, and that's why I generally advocate for honesty and discussion and argument rather than deplatforming and censorship and so on, because if you just ignore it, push it away, it just festers and then it comes out. Johan says, isn't this a case of a spark that just lit the fire? What I've heard, it's kind of result of people have ignored the social issue. Okay, that's really scrambled, Johan, but I think what you're trying to say is that wasn't this just the spark that lit the fire of existing issues? Yes and no. I did talk about all the background stuff, how, especially after we left the EU, immigrants became the new scapegoat for the government and for the far right to heap all their upset upon. But yeah, like most places around the world, you know, cost of living crisis. We had austerity from 2008 onwards, and we're having second austerity, like inverse hobbits, right now for a while due to the horrible state that the Conservatives left everything in. And all the right wing knows how to do in this country is to cut back services and make people's lives worse. And then tell them, well, at least you're not being taxed. But realistically, I think the British population actually would prefer a more Scandinavian sort of system. There is widespread support for paying more tax as long as we get a functional NHS and services and so on from it. But yes, in short, there is a lot going on, but it's nothing to do with immigrants. They are the opposite of a problem when it comes to poverty and deprivation. I would say there is a problem with segregation when it comes to specifically the more recent wave of Muslim immigration, but it is hard to tell how much of that is just it's a new wave that hasn't had a chance to integrate yet. After all, the Pakistani population has integrated incredibly well, the earlier Pakistani wave. Part of the problem is you understand why people all want to settle in one area, right, where they have that community support that they're used to. But at the same time, that entrenches division, because you would think if there was a problem, there would be more racism in areas with very mixed populations. But that's not what we see. The racism is more entrenched in areas that are relatively racially homogenous. So that's a problem here. Kit says, the Tinder hears the damage done by austerity since 2010, which worryingly Reeves seems now ready to repeat. Yes, I would agree. I'm willing to give Labour quite a lot of latitude because they're held to a much higher standard than the Conservatives when it comes to economics and so on. And so if they don't take the hard line, same as if they don't take the hard line on law and order, they will be massively punished for it. I would say at least it's happening early in their term, and at least they're making the payment agreements with the unions, which should redistribute some cash. I think we need to wait to see how the other shoe drops when the budget comes, or the autumn statement, or whatever it is. Then we might know. Yes, there are also migrants that are well educated and adapted or integrated to the culture. Yeah, particularly in this country, I think the West Indians who settled but got a lot of shit for it, they've integrated incredibly well. And the earlier waves of Indian and Pakistani migrants who've come over, they've also integrated very well. Some of that's legacy of empire, I think, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's true. There's a kind of cultural memory of Britishness that helps. Same with the Nepalese, actually. A whole bunch of Gurkhas and their families have resettled in the UK in recent years. Never a problem. I'm not that surprised. My granddad was practically worshipful of the Gurkhas. He always told me they were good people. T-shirt says, guess what? Japan is also having problems with immigrants, Africans and Kurds mostly, making a mess out of their country, and they're pissed off too. Not even going to mention France and Sweden. France's situation is more similar to ours, but it's complicated because they had a very different colonial relationship with their imperial territories, and the French are super racist from a British or American standpoint. They're just not normally quite so open about it. I think you get a taste of what French racism is like if you consider how they reacted to their Eurovision entry. I think it was Sweden. I think is being massively overstated. That's language barriers are a bit of a problem around here. Japan, pretty racist. So it's hard to know quite how bad that is. But it's interesting to see them finally accepting immigrants because, again, the economic realities are if you're a developed nation with a declining birth rate, it's immigrants or, I don't know, force people at gunpoint to fuck. I don't know if I could maintain an erection with a pistol to my temple. Then again, maybe some people are into that. I don't know. I mean, seems like immigration is a big problem all over the world. I mean, yes and no. See, it's a solution to a lot of problems in the West: the declining birth rates, the reduced working age population, the shit jobs that no one else wants to do. That's shit. We should be just paying more, but they'll do it. So we're profiting from, globally speaking, immigration from the global south to the global north, right? From shithole countries, as Trump would say, into the West. And we all benefit. Well, I say we all. Okay. The 1% profits enormously from employing this labor, right? But that wealth is not spread throughout the economy, at least not in the US and not in the UK, and to a greater or lesser extent in other countries. So the very rich see the benefit. We don't. And then people's rightful anger and feeling that they're missing out is then turned on each other. You know that cartoon of Rupert Murdoch? That guy's trying to eat your cookies as he eats an enormous pile of cookies, right? It's that. Watch porn, forget hate. Yeah, interracial porn for peace. Kit says, gotta love Yaxley Lennon and that special breed of English nationalist who proclaims English values like the rule of law. So, yeah, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, that is the real name of Tommy Robinson. The name Tommy Robinson, I think, was taken from a British National Party guy, something like that. He's also had several other noms de plume, and he holds an Irish passport and has currently, as I said earlier, fucked off to Cyprus. So, kind of tells you all you need to know there. Kit says Enoch Powell was very popular among the white working class. There's some extraordinary footage of workers at Billingsgate being interviewed after the Rivers speech and enthused by it. I don't know what it is about the working class in the UK and the US, but they constantly seem to fight against their own interests. It's just weird. So eager to blame the wrong people. Patrick is very aware of Cable Street. Again, I will talk with the National Front. What I'm saying is that ultimately this kind of thing is a constant strain in Britain revolving around English nationalism. Yeah. No disagreement there. It's just the target changes. T-shirt says, all those security cameras put up all over the UK that have been systematically cut down and destroyed all over. That's the ULEZ cameras specifically, the ones that are meant to enforce the low to zero emissions. Those are the ones that have been attacked. Regular CCTV cameras are still everywhere, and also phone cameras are everywhere. And a lot of people who seem to think they were safe are being arrested right now. I think the first rioters being sentenced already because they basically fessed up and pled guilty. So be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, a lot of people are being caught and dobbed in to the fuzz. So feels weird to be rooting for the filth at the moment, but strange times, strange bedfellows. But yeah, those cameras are serving, unfortunately, a purpose. Johan says, sorry, bad at right English. It's fine. I think I got what you were trying to say. T-shirt says, the Japanese are downright xenophobic as hell, and the Chinese are worse, according to friends that have traveled in China. Like, the Japanese, they have a layer of politeness. So even if they don't like you, they will be very polite about it, even if they're horribly racist. Whereas the Chinese will just kind of gawp and say things. I need to go, but we'll just get this last one. Kit says, on working class self-sabotage, I have a nasty feeling a few more severe losses during World War II would have taught us a sharper lesson on just how special the English are, or not. We're another Dunkirk? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of thought that Suez kind of knocked the stuffing out of us for a while and made us realize we're not Billy Big Bollocks anymore. But we seem to have forgotten that lesson in the intervening years. Anyway, it's late. I'm gonna go. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you maybe tomorrow. I think it's tabletopless, so I will probably be resting. Good night.